one of my beefs with 12-step is the inadequacy of the people, leading other people. It's one thing to, if you have a drinking problem, I can tell you should probably quit drinking. If you've got some psychological issues or trauma that you're not dealing with, I am woefully unqualified to be treating that, as are most.
Right.
Yet, you just, hey, sit down, shut up, go to meetings, do your steps, everything's going to be okay, and it's like.
Well, and let me ask you, as you sit here today, and we're going to get into all this eventually, I want to stay on your story, but as you sit here today, what percentage of alcoholics do you think had trauma that they're addressing through drinking?
There are so few what I call garden variety alcoholics who just started drinking and they like drinking and they started drinking too much and there really isn't anything going on other than that what was created as they went along. You know what I mean? Like if they've had a DUI or lost their job as a result of drinking, they kind of create their own trauma. And that in and of itself is an issue too. But most are there's some sort of baggage, and doesn't have to be as serious as childhood sexual abuse or what have you. It can be the death of a mother or father or there's many issues.
But usually probably something at a young age.
In many cases, the real severe cases, yeah, that's what you'll find. Is there something driving that? The real, the ones that chronic relapsing for 10 or 15 years and die of an overdose. They just can't get it.
Yeah. And there's nothing, if you review the 12 steps, there's nothing in the 12 steps that would be something trying to discover prior traumas. That's not in the 12 steps.
Yeah, and I had some pretty stern sponsors early on, and that really annoyed me. Or it annoys me more now than it did then. I just didn't know any different then. You're dying on the inside, so you're figuring, oh, this has got to be what it is. And like to do a fourth step and the eighth and ninth, and I've always loved the way AA owns that stuff. I'm Catholic. We've been doing confessions from the time I was 8 years old on, or whatever it is when you go through that. I think Jews call it atonement. I mean, it's not like it's anything special. But for me to make I get cleaning up my side of the street. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you want to call them Christian values or whatever they are. There's nothing wrong with being a good person and cleaning up your side of the street. And if I owe you an apology, apologize. If I owe you money, make the amend. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're getting ready to hang yourself because there's this huge conflict between, well, now I'm 3 years sober, this shouldn't feel this way, right? Because I've been sober for 3 years. I'm doing all these things that they told me to do, yet this is what I feel on the inside. And nobody's getting to that issue of, that trauma, for lack of, or keeping it simple.
Yeah, one way I like to describe it, it seems to me, is that people are all just kind of white-knuckling it together. We're going to hang in there together, and we're going to support each other because I know you feel like drinking, and I feel like drinking too. Let's talk about it. Let's get it on the table, and we're gonna white-knuckle it together, as opposed to doing something that's addressing the true underlying problem. Isn't that what you're pointing out?
Dr. Lance Dotis talked about that in the film. I don't know if it made it to the film itself. I don't think it is, but he does touch on it a little bit, but he talked about if you built a wall around New York City, and provided nobody made alcohol and there was no alcohol in New York City, you wouldn't have any alcoholism, right? There's no alcohol there. He says, but you'd have a spike in, online porn or gambling addiction or shopping. If you're not treating it, it just moves to something else. And that's really common, right?
Yeah.
So people come in and stop drinking, right? And then it pops up somewhere else because now we're in this abstinence-based program that's not dealing with the real trauma. And if I try to talk about it, like a lot of times saying you have an issue with something at an AA meeting, what happens next is like trying to take a sip of water from a fire hose. It's just like, it's overwhelming and none of it's relevant. So,
yeah. Well, one of the points I like to make when you say that if alcohol wasn't there, it'd be something else is one of the arguments I use, frankly, for the legalization of drugs, because I believe that people are already addicted to something. People with these addicts who are dealing with traumas, there's plenty of things out there right now to get addicted to that are not good for you. So legalizing drugs, I don't think is necessarily going to increase addiction. They're already addicted to something that's very unhealthy.
I agree with you 100%. I get upset with the people that just want to keep marijuana because it's going to, we need to, like fighting, the war on drugs and fighting marijuana. Like my son told his mother, he says, if heroin was legal tomorrow, would you start using heroin? She goes, no, of course not. Well, that's kind of the whole idea here is we spend so much So many resources. Just think of the court costs and incarceration, for marijuana and things like that. And even if you take heroin, so they talk about fentanyl, right? This fentanyl is a problem. Well, yeah, the fentanyl is a problem. Why are the addicts going to the street with fire in their brains, like Kennedy said, looking for something, and they get fentanyl and they die and we blame the fentanyl? Yeah, I guess you could, but if your treatment was so damn hot, they wouldn't be screaming and going to get fentanyl. So it's, if we don't change, and just to be clear, applying a 12-step treatment to a crystal meth addict or a methamphetamine addict or a heroin addict, if your only prescription as the professional is 12-step, you should lose whatever license you had to practice. It's just that simple. It's negligence, I think, at the highest level.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that can be said for 12-step, and I think that Dr. Drew makes this argument, is that, well, at least it's free. You can go to these meetings for free. So how would America, for instance, deal with it if really the issue is getting to childhood traumas or traumas in general, which requires one-on-one psychological counseling? Can we afford it? Who's going to pay for that? That's what's really needed.
Yeah, but it's not happening in AA. So AA
Right.
just becomes I'll give it its due. Like I've learned to say after we've screened the film in groups where the guns are loaded and they're ready to shoot at me after the film when we do the panels, I'll always start by saying, hey, look, I think AA is and always has been absolutely perfect for what it was designed for. Two guys were supporting each other through a common goal. They wanted to quit drinking. To that end, it's been successful. It's fellowship, it's camaraderie, it's, we can do this together. I think that's great. They didn't quit drinking because of AA, because there was no AA. So it's kind of a weird thing to say now that this is the intervention method, is AA. My director, when he was making the film, when he would question people, he's a great storyteller, he's very intelligent. And I remember he looked at me one day perplexed. He says, well, near as I can tell, if you quit drinking, AA works. And that to me was that is the truth.
That's the statement I make, and maybe I made it in one of the episodes, but their big thing is if you work the steps, it works. For people that work the steps, it works. It's like, okay, but what percentage work the steps? It's a failure if 95% of the people don't work your steps, that your steps don't work for them. But yeah, it's the essence. It's the same as saying if you stop drinking, it works.
They like to use diabetes as an analogy sometimes, right? And I like to use it too. If, like type 2 diabetes, and Joe C. talked about this, right? Well, if you diet and exercise and so on, you can manage your type 2 diabetes behaviorally, right? Through diet and exercise. I remember I asked Dr. Finkelstein, he would talk about that, and he would say if they could get their A1C under 7, I'll give them their medicine, but if they can get their A1C under 7, I'll work with them to maybe get them off their medication. They can do it behaviorally. I says, that's fantastic, right? That's kind of like an AA program for somebody that's got alcoholism. We'll try to do it this way. I says, what happens when you apply that same, like if you apply behavioral therapy to a type 1 diabetic? You don't give him his insulin. You tell him to, go through diet and exercise. Well, he'll die. Okay, that's the issue. We've taken a 12-step program, and if you want to look at comparing alcoholism to opiate addiction or methamphetamine addiction, I can't do a better analogy than, alcoholism is the sprained ankle or the broken ankle, and opiate addiction and methamphetamine is a cut jugular vein, and you better treat those things differently, or you're going to wind up with the death rate that you currently have. Alcoholism has a much longer track, right? Before it, becomes, like, yeah, you can die in a drunk driving and whatnot, but opiate addiction and methamphetamine can take you much, much quicker. It's much more devastating. So to treat those things, when you walk into a treatment center, and I love this one, you get individualized treatment. Okay, we have the same sleeping quarters, we go to the same kitchen to eat, we go to the same group lectures, and we each get, 2 or 3 sessions of one-on-one a week. How is that individual? It's not. It's just the words out there when we looked at it, the vernacular, And they all do everything: PSD, eating disorders, bipolar, co-occurring disorders. Just look at any website that treats addiction. They've got the magic wand there. And the truth of the matter is they do none of that with any success whatsoever. But the people,
So you're saying a typical treatment center is treating all addictions?
if you look at most treatment centers and you like what they treat, they're hitting everything, every drug. I mean, they're hitting, methamphetamine, opiates, alcohol, Suboxone, whatever
And
it is.
are they giving you the one-on-one psychological counseling?
Well, we found that with Betty Ford at that time when we were looking at them, and they're in, we showed them in the film. I hate to use the word exposed, but most places like that, you'll get 1 to 3 sessions, one-on-one a week. When we asked the public, when we asked people, where does the value lie in treatment? Like what's, like a bed is a bed, right? So it doesn't matter if you're bed at home or if you're bed in treatment. Food is food, right? So you're eating, those things don't have an impact on outcome. Group lectures, I mean, Dr. Bill Miller made it very clear. Educational workshops, people communicating information has no impact on outcomes, and it's been proven time and time and time again. Yet what do you get when you get there? Because it's the biggest bang. They get the most, if they can put you in a group of 30 people and have somebody talking to you, they're making money. They got to give you one-on-one. That gets a little costly, which made us, my director was confused. He said, I don't get it. Betty Ford's charging $1,000 a day, and they get 2 lectures, and they go to some groups and they do a few other things, and that's it. He says, AA is free. You can go to AA for free, but yet they're charging $1,000 or getting reimbursed $1,000 a day for that. So we could just.
So that's $30,000 a month is typical Betty Ford price?
At our last time we checked, they were over $30,000. The reason it's $53,000 in the film, because I got into a debate with my director. I says, well, if you get a shared room, it was $33,000 when we checked that data. But a private room was $53,000, and we had that verified.
How do they possibly justify that?
Well, going back to I'll wrap it all. It's like, if your only benefit is one-on-one, and if you talk to scientists, right, outside of medically assisted therapies, it's the therapeutic relationship between the addict and the therapist or the counselor, right? Do I trust you? Do I believe you? You can help me? Are you, so on. And the more you get of that, that's where the value lies, is on one-on-one, but it's what you get the least of. So at $53,000 a day, and the reason we laid it beside the seniors care home is there's a certain implied.
Which was, tell people what that was, 10,000?
The seniors care home, we picked one of the most opulent seniors care home in Orange County. It was in Laguna Woods, or near Laguna Woods. The Regency Seniors Care Home. When you walk in there, it's a marble floor. It is stunningly beautiful and opulent, right? You get your own 1-bedroom apartment. And when we laid out
This is what people call assisted living?
Yeah, like a seniors retirement community. Or, yeah, I don't even know if they call that. It's assisted to the degree that you get all these different workshops, like there's spiritual workshops, there's adapting to wheelchair and walker.
And there's access to all kinds of facilities.
Exactly. $4,005 a month, and that is a for-profit company. And we got Betty Ford running $53,000 a day, running groups and workshops. And nobody, if you take, and they're a nonprofit company, you take the $4,000 out, like if you matched it with the seniors care home, what's the other $49,000 for?
And is any insurance paying for that?
Yeah, lots of insurance pays for that.
Yeah. So if I have my standard Obamacare insurance, does it pay for that?
There's limitations, and I think one of the other guests brought this up. There's limitations on what insurance will cover. It's really related to what type of policy you have. Obama, yeah, that's what we found out since the film is the insurance fraud. So your Obama care will cover addiction treatment to some degree. So
to what degree?
Again, it depends on. I can't give you that exact number, but there's access. What they do is they'll verify what benefits. This is what our investigators found out more recently. So those 800 numbers that you see, dial 1-800, you'll love addiction or hope now or help now. A lot of them, what they're doing, they'll verify your insurance. So they'll verify your insurance. What they're doing is they're going to put a dollar value on you. So you have this type of insurance, you're worth $30,000, or maybe you're worth $50,000.
First thing they're going to do is they're going to find out what does your insurance cover. Then they're going to match you with a facility that works best with your insurance. Is that what they're doing?
No, they're going to find out what your insurance is worth, and they're going to sell you to the highest bidder.